Hey, I'm Dan, 37, gay, married, and welcome back to my channel where we are going back to the source material of my favorite show and reading Rachel Reed's books. If you are new here, I did a whole series reacting to each of the episodes as they came out before ever reading the book or even being aware of the Rachel Reed universe. We did deep dives on each of those. And as of this weekend, our boys are officially back in Canada to film season 2, which is amazing, but that also means we've got some time before that is going to be making it to our screens. And so I wanted to go back, read the books, see what differences there were between the TV adaptation and the original text. And I very well may also be getting into some of the other books in the series. But in this video, we are going to be focused on the text that supports episode 3, which is Game Changer. Because this is an entire book, and there is so much more, obviously, that Rachel was able to give us with the 300 plus pages in this book that Jacob and team just simply could not have fit into a 40-minute episode. We're going to break this up into parts. Let me know in the comments, did you guys like episode 3? Did you guys like the book? Did you like them both? Was one better than the other? Just at the top, I thoroughly enjoyed getting all of the depth and color we did from both of the characters in the book, and it definitely made me appreciate the show more. But with that being said, let's dive in. Also, apologies for the Hoochie Daddy shorts. These are the only shorts that I own in red, I guess. All right, so starting with chapter 1, this is our introduction to both Kip and Scott. Our boy Kip is blindingly hungover, unfortunately, which does not go well with the sound of pulsing blenders, I wouldn't think. And we get the first sort of taste of how he views himself in terms of his personal and professional growth. He had been out with friends from college the night before. They're all in, corporate jobs doing things that they wanted to do. Kip, having a history degree, hadn't been able to find a real job that he enjoyed, and that's obviously why he's making ends meet here at Strawberry. And unlike the show, he dozes off, not holding his art history book, but just trying to survive the hangover that was currently had a grip on him, and wakes up to our knight in shining armor, Mr. Scott Hunter. In the book, and obviously on the cover, Scott is blonde and angelic and built like a Navy SEAL, supposedly. I really enjoy Francois, and obviously I'm biased because the show came first, but it was interesting the departure from looks that they went with this. I'm sure Francois was just the right choice, and so him being tall and blonde didn't have to be a part of the show. And we get him, of course, in an Under Armour zip-up jacket and sweatpants. Jacob and team decided to sex it up a little bit more and just have him in a soaking wet Under Armour t-shirt. I also love that he just did that huge campaign with them. It's just, love it. The other interesting thing that stood out when he's talking about the Blue Moon over Brooklyn smoothie is that it's blueberries and pineapple and kale, but we don't get the back and forth with the banana addition that we do in the show. Obviously, it rings a little bit more phallic when that's involved, so I'm sure that was just the choice that they made. And we get a little bit more back and forth about Kip's name, it's short for Christopher, and we get the first instance of this somewhat money dynamic where he gets a big tip from Scott as he leaves, and of course we get the guy coming in, oh my god, was that Scott Hunter? Admits that he, in the book, had known him mostly from his Hugo Boss ads, not necessarily the sport, but he was at least aware of him. And here it says, it was ridiculous, but he felt personally offended by the guy's criticisms and was compelled to defend Scott Hunter. Okay. In the book, Maria missed him. She was in the back doing some prep and is adamant that if and when he comes back, Kip will come and get her and she can see him with her own eyes. I'm going to try and stop myself from saying this 7,000 times in this video. But obviously, they had to condense so much stuff into a very short episode. And so following a timeline throughout this book is nearly impossible. Like, there is so many shifts and changes that kind of got merged together and took out. And so here, he doesn't go and watch the game at the Kingfisher that first night. Instead, he's goes into work. He's reading about the game. Hunter had scored a hat trick. Maria is back to poking fun. Your boyfriend had a good game last night. Jokingly, saying he made like 1 million goals or something. Kip, keeping it honest, says only 3. Calls him a fanboy. And Scott makes his miraculous return back for his smoothie. And again, it's just so intentional with remembering his name and calling him by his name as he walks up to the counter. We get the whole when something goes right with my game, I try and repeat it. And we get Kip. He handed the star athlete his smoothie and tried not to focus too closely on the way his lips wrapped around the straw. Scott was looking directly at him as he took his first sip. Okay. Thanks again, Kip. Hopefully I'll see you next game day. Of course, it seems even absurd to Kip that Scott would possibly even be into him. He clearly hadn't been out publicly. And we get a little bit more world building here where we get Kip's 25. He had graduated at 22. Obviously, a history major, hadn't been able to, snag a great job. His aspirations were to work at one of the main museums or potentially host a popular TV show as he traveled the world and presented from different historic sites. And we also get a little bit more background around Elena. She is, of course, a cybersecurity engineer for Equinox, a bigwig at the company. Smartest person he knew, stunningly beautiful, Norwegian and Lebanese, which was a perfect cast for. And they've been best friends forever, obviously not sexually interested in women. And we get a set that we don't get to see in the show, which is actually Elena's apartment, which is super nice in Manhattan, blah, blah, blah. And she can tell something is off in a good way with her boy Kip, asks who he is, what do you mean, you've had a dreamy look on your face all night. And he admits that he's crushing hard on Scott. And having fun with this, Elena's like, well, we are definitely watching the game. They put it on. Kip is embarrassingly nervous watching the hockey game. Every hit Scott took, Kip flinched. Buddy, buddy, buddy. And we get Elena doing what she does best, which is kind of managing Kip to get his shit together and do what he needs to do. And so she says, next game is Saturday night at home against Tampa. Are you working? Grinned. I've got to switch shifts. He picked up his phone and texted Maria, are you working Saturday? Can I switch with you, please? She gives in, and we get on to Chapter 2. Chapter 1 was pretty spot on, again, with the show, just a little bit more color around Kip's background, his aspirations, and again, the pivot with Elena a little bit, just giving us, again, more of her story. Take a quick second here to thank all of the members of this channel. If you guys didn't know, we have a couple tiers of memberships, and the top tier is the dissertation committee. And I just wanted to give a shout out to my dissertation committee members in this video. Timothy Alberts 5512, Jill Connolly 22, Drama Queen Milena, and Miss Spicy. Thank you all. Your support means the world to me. And I hope you guys are enjoying all of the long-form, copyright-riddled videos that I've been putting together for you guys. All right, back to the book. Chapter 2. This is the chapter which we get the game invitation. Kip got up extra early, put additional care into his appearance, wore his sneakers he could not afford at all, and he even flossed. It's like a little reminiscent of our boy Shane putting on a suit for a hookup. A couple extra steps, but hey, why not? He was there 10 minutes early, made sure he had all of the ingredients ready to go. And his deadbeat coworker was sick, couldn't come in. He was totally fine with that. That meant he got to have the place to himself with Scott. The inner dialogue. You are way too excited about the possibility of a 2-minute interaction with a man who is not at all interested in you, Kip. We've all been there. We've all been there. And we get him doing a little bit of a deep dive on Scott. He was born in Rochester, very generous with his devotion to charities, helps sick children, outstanding role model, and one of New York's most eligible bachelors, noting that he tends to dodge questions about his private life. Makes sense. Kip was saving photos from Scott's GQ article onto his phone when the door opened. Just don't have it as your background, dude, you know? Scott's face lit up. Kip, he said, a little too happy. I was worried you might not be working today. You were? Kip asked. I just mean, our little boy, our boy Scott's a little embarrassed. And we get Kip starting to actually flirt here. He says, must be something about the way I make him. He said, bravely attempting a flirtatious smile, to which Scott says, must be. He admits to watching the game and gives him a little compliment about his last goal. And he turned on the blender before he could say something stupid, like, what do your abs taste like? Being nice, Scott asked, were you here alone today? He gives him the whole story and then catches himself being like, why would Scott care about this coworker? I think trying to find some common ground. He's like, I've had teammates like that. It sucks. I'm sorry. And we get the, hey, do you mind if I drink this here? I've got some emails to catch up on, which we saw on the show. He was drinking it very slowly, it seemed, and Kip left his station, wiping tables that didn't need to be cleaned. We get the back and forth about the ritual and somewhat insanity of athletes. There isn't any of this like serial killer talk that that Jacob and team wove into the show, but we do get the I'm not complaining, you all look like a bunch of hot lumberjacks. And we get a little bit more of the inside thought, Kip's like there, so that was out there. Scott looked at him and Kip could swear the ghost of a smile passed over his lips. But then Scott stood abruptly, the smile was gone. Well, I should get going. Damn. Way to go, Kip. But then we get the pause. Would you want to go to the game tonight? I could give you 2 tickets. You can bring ... someone ... if you like, which is not something we got in the show. Obviously, Kip is over the moon, happy to go. And we get something that I definitely picked up on. And I think it must be the way Rachel writes her characters, but there's always like a definitive, no questions asked answer to things like that. So he explicitly says, I am sure, and he'll see you tonight. He obviously chooses to take Elena, which we saw in the show. Supposedly her company has box seats here. These are even better than those. We get the joke about it being a weird date. Again, trying to somewhat convince himself that there wasn't more to this or he wasn't overreading it. We get the, like how you're sitting in his personal seats because he personally gave you his personal tickets when he visited you at work for the 3rd time this week. I think we can probably assume that there's more going on. We also get Scott doing some deep lunging hamstring stretches, which triggers Kip's imagination. And we get the skate past and nod. We only get 1 in the book. I think we get 2-ish, 2 or 3-ish in the book. Obviously, he is convinced that it means nothing. Elena knows better. And we get a little bit more around kind of him realizing the celebrity that is Scott, right? The entire rink is there cheering for him. This guy was a big star, really big star. He was New York, blah, blah, blah. And this was interesting, and we'll see obviously a lot more of it as we go, but even the referees liked him. Like he was the good guy on the ice. They won. Kip is hot and bothered with having seen him score goals and beat up other guys on the ice. And Elena, again, is bringing some of the reality here. They're on the subway headed back, and she brings up that the Admirals are going on the road for 2 weeks, which is obviously a buzzkill. And Kip was somewhat devastated, even though he knew he shouldn't be. And we get this wondering if Scott was at all unhappy about going on the road away from his safe routine. Again, Chapter 2, pretty damn close to the actual show, with a little bit more of Kip's kind of inner thoughts, trying to convince himself and also not convince himself that there's something here. Chapter 3 is a complete departure from the show. We get Scott going on the road, and we get introduced to a number of his teammates and really do some deeper kind of backstory building on Scott's relationship with his sexuality. So he watched as the skyline disappeared. They're on the plane. He felt off but didn't know why. His agent, who had been representing him since college, was finally happy with him again. Obviously, his game had really turned around. He'd been winning thanks to whatever it was. But prior to that, he was not very well. He was not doing great, to the point that even one of the biggest sponsors of his, Under Armour, was getting nervous. Obviously, Scott isn't blaming anyone else. It's just that was his game. But he got a very different call right before he left. Whatever you did to get your game back, keep doing it. Check. And almost answering Kip's question at the end of Chapter 2, we get Scott never minded being on the road. He didn't have a wife or kids, but for the first time in his career, Scott felt absurdly like he was leaving someone behind. We then get introduced to Carter, and we hear about his TV actress girlfriend, Gloria. Scott pulling out a book. It was a dumb spy novel, but something to pass the time with. And obviously his mind is wandering. He's thinking about Kip, and him reading into the fact that Kip hadn't actually acknowledged his nod or done anything back. He admitted that he was absurdly happy to seeing him sitting in the arena, and happier to see that he had brought a female friend. I hadn't thought about that, but obviously, there is a chance that Kip had a boyfriend, and so he would have brought his boyfriend if this really was just what they're trying to convince themselves it might be, which is this platonic thing. And then we get the other potential reality that maybe he's bi. And Scott admitting very much so he was not bisexual. It was very clear that he was gay, and he had known that for a very long time. He acknowledges that there are no NHL players that are gay, correcting himself, no NHL players that are out, obviously, and that most of the players were married young, had a bunch of kids, and took their family to the cottage for the summer. He obviously keeps a very low, discreet profile. We find out that he had never even tried to hook up with anyone in New York. Obviously, he's super famous. Somebody would recognize him. And that the only time he really allowed himself to explore with guys was over the summer, when he would fly to some exotic place that basically had no clue what hockey was or who he was. And he's acknowledging how different it is and how unlike him it is that he is flirting with Kip. And he acknowledges there's just something about him. Obviously, he was good looking, fucking gorgeous, and with those dimples in those eyes. At the game last night, Scott had finally gotten a glimpse of Kip when he wasn't wearing a ball cap and an apron. He'd like to get a much closer look sometime. There was just something about him. Scott wanted to talk to him for hours and to find out everything about him, show him everything, give him everything. Lock that one away. And we switch over to Kip. He's at home. His dad, who I absolutely loved from the show, is there. He asked how the game was the other night, acknowledging that was super nice for Scott to give him those tickets. And we hear about Kip's mom, who I don't even think she's referenced in the show, but she definitely isn't a character that's shown in the show. And we get Kip's dad saying, "I don't think there's a person in Brooklyn your mother hasn't told about that." Interesting, given the closet of it all. He loves his parents, loved their house, but obviously wanted to get out on his own. He's 25, right? And his dad asked about Elena. Completely impressive in every way. Clocking, his dad chuckled and leaned back. "So this thing with Scott Hunter, ... There is no thing with Scott Hunter." "All right," as if to say, fine, none of my business. He says, "Seriously, he just thinks the dumb smoothies I make are good luck or something. Nothing to do with me. Your mother will be very disappointed to hear that." Love it. We also briefly get introduced to Megan, who's Kip's big sister that will be coming around for dinner, and we swap back to Scott. They unfortunately have lost their first game, and he admits that he hadn't even showed up tonight and that it should have been an easy win. And we get introduced to Huff and Anderson. Anderson is a new young goalie that I guess they had put in because it was supposed to be an easy win and get him some practice, but he got kind of beat up here. We also get introduced to Frank Zulo, who is quite a character here. A bully, a bit of a creep, a brutal fighter, not someone that Scott is a fan of, and doing his duties as El Capitan. Scott grabs Anderson and says, dude, it's not your fault. We all played like shit. Don't let it affect you. You're good. We switch over to Kip. Then he is at the Kingfisher, which we see a handful of times in the show. And this time he's meeting just with Sean. And this is a big departure between who they cast and I guess the gravitas that that character carried in the show versus who he is in the book. In the book, he's described as handsome, dark skin, warm smile, an impeccable dancer, basically looking like a J. Crew model. We also find out that they had kind of hooked up a little bit in college, and we also get introduced to Kyle, who's the bartender, and again, the character in the show, there's quite a departure from the character in the show and how they're described in the book. Slim, athletic build, blonde hair falling in his face, the type of guy, exactly Kip's type. We then also get Sean trying to help guide Kip as well, kind of playing like a parallel path to Elena. He had talked to some of their friends. They'd maybe ganged up on him asking me what the fuck I was doing with my life, encouraging you to pursue your dreams, trying to get him to apply for another job. And one of Sean's friends actually works at the Museum of the City of New York. They were looking for an assistant educator, just like it's at least better and closer to what you want to do than making smoothies. I love this. We get Sean saying, do I need to use my Elena voice? Clearly, everyone kind of knows her for who she is. He's like, nope. Okay, you will apply for this job, and you will dazzle them with your charm and your love of history and the fact that you've lived here all of your life. All right. He finally is broken down. He says he'll apply. Now that he's accepted his fate, Sean turns his attention to be like, okay, so now why don't you go celebrate your forward progress with the cute boy behind the bar. Kip stopping himself because he wasn't sure he wanted to say, I'm holding out for someone else right now. You probably know him. He's the captain of the New York Admirals. You might remember him from People Magazine's 50 Most Beautiful People. Yeah, I have a crush on him. He's almost definitely hetero, fingers crossed. But instead we get, I think I'm going to head home early tonight, but let's see if we can find you someone. We fast forward to the next game on the road. Zulo is being himself and is going into the penalty box. Scott, trying to keep him calm, gets him over there, but does kind of bark at the ref a little bit. But thankfully, despite the chaos, they win, and Scott feels like he officially has his game back. The main standout from that chapter, for me, that really helped kind of add to the world building of these two characters was kind of the back and forth and push with Kip almost being paralyzed in his current job and like not feeling that maybe he's good enough for an opportunity like the one that he wants at the museum. Another set of friends kind of angling and trying to push him to make that step, make that move. Again, kind of pitting him in his mind against the success of others and their maybe ability to take life by the horns and like go for what they want. He seems to want that, but maybe not be able to action on that himself. Chapter 4 is when we get to see Kip doing the catering gig where he first kind of runs into Scott out in the wild. A pretty important departure from the show. Kip had more than one job, obviously. He was on a call list for hired servers. There was a fundraiser for one of the children's hospitals, Black Tie, at Chelsea Piers. Kip was available, and he really needed the money. He had worked a shift at Strawberry, had some time to kill, and so he opted to head to Starbucks to kill some time. And he had been kind of hoping the 2-week Scott Hunter drought would be enough to end this ridiculous crush. No such luck. But he did want to make sure he was working. Hopefully Scott would come by so that he could thank him for the tickets. And as you do when you have time to kill and a crush, his mind just starts to wonder, what would it be like to have access to his body? What would it be like to date someone as famous and as rich as Scott? He couldn't even fathom. And again, playing on this disparity of financial situations, we get Kip saying he couldn't even imagine what it would feel like to be able to afford the Starbucks sandwich he had kind of wanted to order with his coffee. We find out Kip hadn't gotten any action in 3 months. He hadn't really been going out much. He'd never been in a relationship either, which was interesting. The Kip that we see in the show has a level of comfortability that feels like I would have assumed that he had had a handful of relationships before. But in the book, it's more of he loved the challenge of picking up guys at the bar. He was naturally flirtatious. And we switch POVs to Scott's. He is in his tux. He hates these events, but wanted to use his celebrity for good. Never minded public speaking, but hated being on display for a room of wealthy, fawning donors. He was tired. Obviously, he had been on the road. And hungry. Cue Loverboy. Server turned Kip. And instead of a full tray fall, which we get in the show, it wobbled dangerously. Scott wobbled, but he recovered. And we get Scott thinking he was more beautiful than he had remembered even. Trying to do some small talk. Do you work a lot of these things? He's grabbing, obviously, some appetizers off the tray. And he desperately tried to think of something else to ask him. Thankfully, Kip had his opportunity to thank him for the tickets. No problem. I'm glad you had a good time. It was nice seeing you there. Okay. Oh, you saw me? Yeah, I nodded at you when I skated by. Kind of subtle, I guess. We're not holding back here. Oh no, I saw it. I just didn't think it was meant for me. Again, being definitive, Scott says it was. Anyway, I'll let you get back, blah, blah, blah. And as a subtle gesture, Scott placed a hand on Kip's free arm, needing to make contact somehow. It was nice seeing you, Kip. Throughout the night, he kept trying to scan the room for Kip, caught his eye a couple times, and we get Scott admitting that he is officially in trouble. And after a speech, he goes and finds Kip. You have to stay much longer, another hour maybe. And Scott, being the superstitious guy he is, he believed everything happened for a reason, and it couldn't be a coincidence that Kip was here tonight. It was an opportunity. Scott just didn't know what to do with it. Kip acknowledges that he's starving, even though he's been carrying around these trays all night. And he kept his eyes on Scott's, waiting. And Scott knew this was his moment right here. There's a place a couple blocks from here that has great burgers. It's open late. Different than the show. In the show, it was, I believe, a Mexican restaurant. I was thinking about heading there after. And Kip, just kind of putting it out there, says, "Are you asking me to come get a burger with you?" ? Scott was obviously terrified, but answered yes. He says, "All right, I'll meet you as soon as I'm done here at the front doors." He finishes up, and unlike the shot that we see in the show where he's waiting in some back alley, Scott has gone and raided a local bodega and is wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt that had Brooklyn across the front and a knit hat that said NYC. Clearly trying to find some sort of disguise here. Obviously, Kip is looking at this guy and thinking he had frantically bought souvenir clothing so he could go on a date with him. Big stuff. Winter and cold. And so Kip's like, "You must be freezing. You sure you want to walk there? We could grab a cab." Scott, trying to limit the opportunities for him to be noticed, is like, "No, I'm good." And clearly was not correctly dressed and was, in fact, very cold. They talk a little bit about being on the road. They won 5 out of the 7 games. and then kind of like ran out of things to talk about because they don't know each other. I walked another block in silence, and finally they reach the burger place. They ordered. Scott paid. They banter a little bit back and forth. Do you live in Manhattan? No, I live in Brooklyn. Born and raised. Scott then offers up, I'm from Rochester. And not hiding the fact that he's been doing deep dives on this guy. He's like, yep, I know. We get Scott saying, my life is kind of public knowledge. And Kip kind of jokingly and flirtatiously comes back at him with, but I bet you have some secrets. And Scott blushed a little bit, which Kip found very cute. We also get Scott asking, do you like the work that you're doing? It's all right. I don't really like it. I have a history degree. And we get Kip kind of feeling bad for Scott, just acknowledging like he didn't get to finish college because he had to get drafted. And basically every piece of his life was kind of owned by somebody else since he was a teenager. Kind of like caught Scott off guard. Like he has felt that way, but maybe never let himself actually say it or believe that it was true. But I think just hearing it from Kip, he's like, oh my God, yeah, that is exactly it. I feel that way. I just don't want to ever complain. Kip takes that opportunity to say, well, you can complain to me, right? I'll be your safe space. And that set something off in Scott. He would have expected Scott to lunge across the table and haul him into a hungry kiss based on the way he was looking at him. Breaking the moment a little bit, worried you'll get recognized because he was still wearing the winter hat. And we get kind of an honest answer back from Scott. I'm not worried, I'm just hoping I won't. Not right now. Just admits, hey, it's nice doing this. Hanging out with someone? No, hanging out with you. Scott looked absolutely tortured. His eyes were pleading with Kip to understand him, to not make him spell it out. I'm not good at this. It's important for me to keep my private life private, so I don't ever fill in the blank. Kip comes in and says, pick up guys. Yes, Kip couldn't believe it, but the date was actually a date. Suddenly, he didn't want to eat another bite. He wanted to get Scott somewhere private. So he asks boldly, is there somewhere we can go? Yeah. He knew what this was. Hunter wasn't out. He had to get his action discreetly as possible. Nothing serious or long-term. Kip was more than happy to help. Let's go. The biggest component of Chapter 4 that differs from the show is the fact that they actually made it out to the restaurant. We obviously are still going to see that doesn't inhibit them from getting the action that we see in the show. But I think, for me, one of the main components that helped me love Scott more in the book than maybe I did from the show were these moments where he pushed his boundaries early and hard as best he could to try and do things like take him on a date, take him out to eat, and them making it to the place, even if he is sitting there in a winter hat trying to not be noticed, is significant, I think, to me, and adds a layer of effort and willingness to be risky even this early on that I find really appealing about the Scott from the book. Chapter 5. This chapter is pretty much just focused on their first time together back at Scott's apartment. Clearly ready to move on to the next step of the date. They both threw the rest of their food in the garbage, jumped in the back of a black SUV. Discreetly, Kip puts his hand on Scott's thigh, is explicit in saying, I can keep a secret, as a whisper so that the driver didn't hear. Again, setting the tone for what's to come. He also says, and I promise I'll make it good for you. To which Scott says, I know, as he put his hand over Kip's and entangled their fingers. I had never thought about where, obviously, Scott lived in Manhattan, but I think it was a great choice to have him on the Lower East Side so that there's a view over to Brooklyn from his place. It's a nice sort of like duality of where, Kip could basically look out the window and see like home, but from this, skyscraper in Manhattan, obviously an expensive building, private elevator up to his unit, floor-to-ceiling windows are getting at it. For like a comedic beat, I really liked the way that Jacob and team did it, where he just is standing there without, obviously, his shirt on. And he's like, would you like the full tour? And we get the or type of thing. Loved that. But he placed his hands on Kip's face, kissing him like a starving man, like he hadn't been with anyone in ages. True. Kip obviously is trying to just like wrap his mind around it. Can't believe this is actually happening. And he's like, you have a bedroom? Yeah. And he sounded a little nervous, which is interesting here. And we get Kip kind of taking the lead here. He could tell he was nervous, and he just says, let me take care of you. You can just be Scott from Rochester tonight, okay? And he looked at him with so much gratitude, it was heartbreaking. They are mesmerized with one another. Scott lets out, you are gorgeous. And we get Kip being like, okay, what do you want to do with me? Right? Like, I am here to make you feel good. Another honest share out of Scott. I don't know. There are a lot of things I've thought about. Kip's mouth dropped. Scott was thinking about this with me. And gathers himself, pick your favorite, or hell, your top 10, I've got plenty of time. Scott broke their kiss, looked down at him with wild eyes, and Kip breathed, do it. Whatever you're thinking, please. We again continue to get this great consent sort of action throughout. He's glanced up, asking for permission. Yes, please. And we get Scott maybe being a little frantic, a little overexcited. Slows him down a little bit, knowing that he wants to keep this going and not just have it be some quick thing. Kip kind of pauses him, asks him again, point blank, what do you want? And Scott says what he wants. Kip had sort of assumed that the captain of an NHL team might be kind of a toppy. Ding, 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 ding. And Scott asks, is that okay? It's what I've been thinking about the most. Kip is happy to oblige. We get Kip teasing him a little bit with his mouth as he's kind of getting him loose and ready. As he's getting him comfortable, he again is doing the work of like, stay in this room. It's just you and me. Don't think about anything else. Nothing matters but making each other feel good, blah, blah, blah. They continue to just compliment each other back and forth, clearly both just like in awe of one another. And we get Scott folded up and not wanting Kip to hold back. And it was a success. And we get Scott saying, thank you. You have no idea. Thank you. And Kip is just like, you're thanking me? What in what universe? He admits it's been a long time, since August, since one of his trips. Kip is like assuming, great, this is what you wanted to do, right? And we did it, and it was great, and we had an awesome time. And this is, again, a little different than the show. In the show, it seems like he had gone to clean up, and maybe Scott had dozed off, and that he had like tried to be quiet and like leave without waking him up. But in this, Scott is awake and sees him, and Kip just says, well, thanks for that. And he said, you're leaving? Sounding disappointed. You don't have to. You can stay. I'd like you to stay if you want. And he actually looked nervous, as if he thought Kip might turn him down. In more of this kind of jokey Brooklyn guy mode that the book carries more so than obviously Kip in the show. Don't gotta twist my arm was his response to that. And they basically hang out for the rest of the night, talk about things. I want to know more about you. I know my real name is Christopher. I live with my parents. He was somewhat embarrassed about that, but we get a way for them to connect when it comes to finances. And we hear, don't be embarrassed. I grew up dirt poor. I got a scholarship to boarding school with a great hockey program when I was 14. Free ride. I just wish my mom, she died when I was 15. She was really amazing. Only child. And it was just the two of them. And in the show, it's both of his parents died from a drunk driver, I think. Both have things to do early tomorrow morning. Kip then asks one more time, like, you're sure you want me to stay? And again, coming back with that crystal clear, no questions asked, we get definitely. Scott said it so warm, so affectionately, Kip's heart fluttered. Oh, one night, Grady. Don't go getting stupid. Appreciate what you've been given here. Kip got under the sheet with Scott, rested his head on his chest, letting the rise and fall of his breathing lull him to sleep. Jacob and team kept the positions and all of the kind of acts, at least early on that first time, to be fairly vague for Scott and Kip. Obviously, we find out how that went, and that, in fact, it was probably the inverse of what most people would have assumed, that Scott really wanted to receive, and he did, and they both enjoyed it. But otherwise, I mean, thematically, it followed what we had seen in the show, and the only piece that was really missing was the sort of back and forth conversation before they went to bed. Moving on to chapter 6, this is when we get a little bit of the confirmation that this is something Scott is going to want to continue. I think we probably got a taste of that with him asking him if he would stay, but this is when the phone number gets exchanged. Scott blinked awake to the sound of his alarm, and it took him a moment to register the weight on his chest that was making it difficult for him to reach his phone. Kip. He is clearly so proud of himself. He'd done it, successfully picked up a guy here in Manhattan, kissed him on the top of the head. Kip made a small noise of sleepy protest. Sorry to wake you, I need to go. You can stay if you, which gets intercepted by Kip being like, no, I should go. Scott assumes that means that he probably has work today. He's like, no, but I should probably just go home. And Kip, not looking to overstay his welcome, is up, grabbing clothes. And Kip now is tracking when the games are, when he's going to be working. He says, I'm working tomorrow. You play tomorrow night, right? Yeah, and Saturday. Well, I guess I'll see you tomorrow morning, unless you think the magic smoothie isn't working anymore. And Scott obviously grinned. I think it's still working. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. It's like we hooked up, cool, heading for the door. And Scott wasn't going to let him just leave. He strode over to Kip, kissed him, held his face in his hands, and tried to show him what he was feeling, since he couldn't tell him. I'll see you tomorrow. This was his first taste of like what it could be if he was to actually have a boyfriend, do these sorts of things. And so we get him kind of like running through it. He used to think that this was just the price. He couldn't fall in love. But with each season, he found it more of a struggle to actually conceal who he was. He wasn't lonely exactly, but he longed for something of his life that had nothing to do with hockey. But his life belonged to too many people. The NHL, the Admirals, his agent, his coaches, his sponsors, blah, 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 blah. Again, setting the tone that his life isn't his, and so even if he was to do something to make him feel better, he has the guilt of that potentially impacting a whole slew of other people. We then get being like, you have to come to this gala with me or we're not friends. Kip doesn't have a tux. She's like, rent one. I need you to problem solve here. I don't need any of your BS. For the first time, Kip kind of feels like maybe my life is turning around here, right? I'm invited to this cool gala. I might have a job opportunity that Sean and friends are trying to get me. He has a new friend in Scott. Just as he said, he sees Scott at Strawberry. The next morning, Scott was a little bit disappointed to see that he wasn't alone. Maria was in fact there. We get the usual back and forth. He glanced at Maria, who had just been silently watching them both the whole time. He quickly looked away after he felt himself blushing. When he glanced back at Scott, he was blushing too. Again, filling the space. Game. Yep. And then a day off before a short road trip. Day off. I was thinking about staying home, maybe watching a movie. Handed him his usual $20 tip. And again, see you later, Kip. Maria clocked the whole thing. It's like, are you guys freaking engaged? What is going on? Trying to say nothing. His face was giving him away. And as he unfolded the bill to put it in the cash register, he found a tiny slip of paper tucked inside. In very neat handwriting, Scott Hunter's phone number on it and the word Sunday written underneath. Well, he allowed himself a minute to do a little Scott Hunter totally wants me dance in the privacy of the back room. He comes back the day of his game for his usual smoothie. They win. One of the interviews Scott had done, he was asked point blank what he attributed the turnaround in his game to. And he said, shyly, I guess I found something that reignited me. It's our hottie at the smoothie shop, baby. I remember these days where you're like trying to play it cool. You don't know if you should like text him right away in the morning or whatever. But we get Kip trying to like navigate this and be like, well, I guess I'll go to the gym, eat something, and then maybe I'll text him. And so he finally did. Hey, it's Kip. So good to hear from you. I was worried you had lost my number, immediately informing Kip that he should have texted him earlier. And just as he was about to text back, the phone rang. It's nice to hear your voice, Kip. I've been thinking a lot about the other night. I was hoping you might want to come over later. We could get some food delivered, watch a movie. It doesn't just have to be ... That sounds perfect, as long as it can also include ... So what time do you want me? I'm not doing anything. Come on over. And the ultimate question, should I bring an overnight bag? Yeah, bring one. Absolutely. Whew! The way the show kind of rapidly moved us through these sequences, right, was more so like Kip just never left. And so at some point, obviously, they got one another's phone numbers. But this was a cool way to introduce that. I always like forget that these were written before the time where like everyone would just, if this was to play out like today, right, you would try to at least find them like on social media or something, and that would be a way that you could actually like connect with them without having to like physically give them your phone number or anything like that. And I remember that same thought dawning on me as I was watching the whole back and forth with Shane and Ilya, same thing. But this is a cute way to introduce that and give us the experience of Maria seeing them this way for the first time and being like, oh my God, this is crazy. You guys are not good at hiding this at all. Can't wait. Jumping into chapter 7, which covers their Sunday in together at Scott's apartment. Our boy Scott is fairly nervous here. All morning he'd be worried Kip wasn't even going to reach out to him. He was smart, gorgeous, a really good kisser, and we're rearranging pillows, brushing our teeth again, choosing outfits that might complement his eyes. Goes down to the lobby to actually go and meet Kip, which is a fairly stark contrast to what we had seen with Shane and Ilya, right? Obviously, Shane bought a whole building so that they could be together without being seen, going through the back door, not even in the front, all of that, whereas there's some piece of Scott that is much more comfortable, I guess, with maybe even the risk of people seeing him. And they're making small talk. Congrats on the win last night. Scott just couldn't take it anymore and needed to jump him. Through the kissing of it all, he lets out, I missed you. Kip smiled, and obviously he's like, you're a hard guy to forget. They clumsily fall over the back of the couch. Again, somewhat reminiscent of the cottage scene with Shane and Ilya. Equally as enthusiastic about getting back to some sort of physicality, and is, taking off his clothes, notices a big bruise that he got from the night before, and jokingly is like, let me kiss it better, let me see if there are any other bruises to find, etc., etc. Rachel writes, his arousal seemed to unearth his Brooklyn accent, which, again, I'm biased because I went show first, and we didn't make, I don't think, a big deal about him being from Brooklyn anyways in the show. But when I tried to listen to the audiobook, I got about 30 seconds in and had to shut it off because the narrator was doing this like Brooklyn accent that just took me so far out of it, like immediately. And so I like have an aversion to like reading that line because I just then am flashed back to trying to listen to the audiobook, which was insanity. Kip is very interested in performing something he didn't get to do last time. And with like the comfort level that they've built up, as well as they basically have the whole day together, Kip takes his time, and Scott just can't help himself but say what's on his mind, which is, "You're so gorgeous. So many things I want to do with you." And Scott finishes. It's now his turn to help Kip. He brings up an exhibitionist theme that seems to be something Rachel tends to write. "I want to watch you fill in the blank," but he can't keep his hands off of him, so that doesn't fully work. And we get some jokes between them of, "No wonder you're the team captain, you're such a great motivator, blah, blah, blah." It was just the first round. There was also a second round we don't get any details about, and they're just kind of like laid out on the bed. And the food that they were going to order has not been ordered yet. So after all of that activity, Scott is starving, so is Kip, but they both probably need to take a quick shower. And they were just kind of like amazed, like after how many rounds, still couldn't keep their hands off one another. They finally get back to ordering food. Kip asks Scott if he's going to the Equinox Gala and tells him that he's going to. Rightfully, Scott assumes it's a catering job. He's a little bit embarrassed that he made that assumption, but water off the duck's back for Kip. He tells him that no, he's actually going with his friend Elena, who was the one that he went to the hockey game with. And the vibe gets a little weird. Scott's like, "I'm looking forward to seeing you all dressed up." Kip just kind of wants to be smothered by Scott in a physical way. And so he kind of like pulls him on top of him. Obviously, Scott's a little worried that he's going to crush him, but that's actually kind of what Kip wants. That slight tension sends Kip thinking about, "God, don't have feelings like this. You know that this was never going to be something long term, anything more than like hooking up in secret, blah, blah, blah." But admitting to himself it was not going to be easy to walk away based on how they had evolved their relationship up until this point. We also find out that Scott has 2 home games this week, one with Pittsburgh and one with Boston, where Ilya obviously is on the team. As they're talking through logistics, Kip realizes that he's not going to be working Saturday, and he has a game Saturday, so how is he going to get his smoothie, right? And he's trying to, and that, I guess, kind of catches Scott off guard a little bit, trying to recover. Kip's like, "Well, I can always call Maria and switch, blah, blah, blah." And we get the moment that has been kind of lingering here, which is, we should probably talk. This whole sequence obviously is cut and pasted in bits and snippets into what we see in the show. But I get the sense that this conversation was maybe the tone that Jacob and team brought to the "I'm intense" sort of talk that they have at the kitchen island. But here, obviously Kip hears this, his heart sinks, and Scott begins to explain, "I'm closeted, I need to hide that part of me, I've never dated anyone," basically like all of this is completely new, and that he didn't think that he needed this in his life, and is reconciling that it probably was that he just had never met the right person. It's not the smoothies, right? So Kip freaking out about trying to get a shift so that he can get the smoothie, like, that's not the thing. God admits, "I want to date you." And want is a very key word here. Quick to respond, Kip says, "Me too," but Scott kind of doubles down with, "I want to date you, I just don't know how," right? "These are my circumstances, here's you, here's this whole thing, I just don't know how to do it." In a bit of desperation, it feels like Kip is saying, "I can keep a secret, it doesn't have to be, anything, it's really whenever you have time." In the show, right, I think the first sneak peek we get of Scott understanding that he's asking a lot of Kip in a way that's like real and could be affecting him was the gala, where we see him dancing with Elena and we get the sunshine thing and all that. But here in the book, we're getting it already here, page 81. You deserve better than that, Kip, right? Like, he recognizes that he is not giving him the entirety of what he should or could and what he would want for Kip. And in response, Kip says, I can settle for you, right? Like, this is already way beyond what I could even dream. Like, there are gives and takes, whatever. And Scott comes back with, you won't have to settle for anything, not if I have anything to say about it. That, I guess, is the resolution here. And they are now, in some way, shape, or form, considering themselves as boyfriends. With that, they're back at it. They are going to be very tired. Kip is wanting a bit more of a forceful version of Scott here, sounding every bit like the respected team captain that he is. Scott just admiring what's in front of him. You are absolutely stunning. Goes to town of warming him up a little bit. There's a little bit more of a, I guess actually interestingly in a almost a reverse way, where Shane and Ilya, it was like very physical, very like hyper intense right away, and that folded into more of this like intimate moments together. It's almost like as Scott is getting more comfortable, I guess, in his skin or with Kip, he's able to like unleash some of that a little bit more and like explore more in what they're doing, and that is exactly what Kip is wanting from him. And we find out that he has only ever topped one time, which tells you generally where his go-to preferences are. And so he's just worried that he's going to hurt Kip. Kip is not concerned about that. And we get a little bit more of this like authoritative tone. We're using last names, blah, blah, blah. And even though we have this version of Scott, he then, once kind of the moment has lifted, is still attentive and wants to go run and, you know, and just, again, can't get enough. Like, you are incredible. He really reads as if he is straddling this line where he feels that it's real, but he can't yet fully believe that this is actually happening. And they've kind of settled back in, and we get one of the first big kind of asks that Scott makes of Kip from a financial perspective, which is, can I buy you a tux for the gala? And he's like, I can call Hugo Boss. I do ads for them. You don't have to pay anything. Just walk in. They'll put it on my account. They'll get you set up. It's great. And Kip clearly feels uncomfortable with this. Seems a bit generous. And Scott, kissed him and basically is like, I want you wearing a suit that I bought you and later take it off of you, blah, 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 blah. Trying to, I think, skirt the issue and not have it be necessarily about the money, but have it be about discretion. Kip's like, isn't that kind of weird if I just walk into a Hugo Boss store and you're like, it's under Scott Hunter's thing? Like, and I get it. So then Scott's like, well, okay, I guess I have Hugo Boss tuxes here. What if I gave you mine? Very clearly not the same size. But I think Kip understands he's not going to win this battle. And so he gives in, says, fine, I'll go and have it tailored. And they're back to just lovey-dovey status. This context was also super helpful from the book in terms of understanding the gift choice that we get in the show. Obviously, in the show, we see them have this moment where he tries to take him to the art gallery, and that goes horribly. And as part of, this may just be in sequencing, but it seems like shortly after that, he leaves a gift for Kip in his closet, or which is a tux. And to me, without any of this context, it was like, it felt like an apology gift. And if that was the case, why would you not buy him a piece of the art or something like that? With this context, the tux has an important role to play in their story. Makes a lot more sense now, having read the book, about why that was kind of the symbolic gift. Chapter 8, we've got Scott on the road, and he's missing his boy Kip, and so we get a bit of the business center phone call, and he asks Kip if he will come over for Valentine's Day. We start off the chapter being introduced to Scott's sort of like ragtag group of friends that are all on the team. We've got obviously Carter, who we've met. We've got Eric Bennett, Greg Huff, and they're all just giving him shit about, quote unquote, saving himself for marriage. Even joke about maybe he's secretly dating Greg's brother. And we get him experiencing his otherness, even in the safety of his friends, right? But he does call out, none of them really fit the mold. Bennett seemed more like a kindergarten teacher than a superstar goaltender, never drank or partied. He had kind of like found his tribe inside the NHL. He goes up to bed, obviously Kip on the brain, texts him saying, I miss you. Joking back, Kip says, already? And another confident confirmation, yes, already. Me too. And I was thinking about Friday. What is Friday? Valentine's Day. Will you come over that night? I want to cook you dinner. Kip, obviously joking, is like, I'll check my schedule. Scott takes it a little bit to heart. Oh, okay. Obviously, I'm free. I was kidding. And Scott is wanting to hear his voice, so he asks if he can call, runs down to the business center, and they just kind of talk back and forth. I really just wanted, to hear your voice. I do think it's so funny that the team captain would have to share a room with another player. I mean, maybe that's just normal. I wouldn't want to, but whatever. He asks, hey, did you find a tailor? He's like, no, I was going to ask Elena. I would offer to pay. I don't think you would let me. You're right. That whole thing. Scott is a little confused. He's like, wait, does Elena know? And he's like, no, I haven't told her, but she's going to figure it out. She's smart. She knows me. And again, we get this real departure from the Scott that we see in the show. And he is like super upfront and just says, no, you should tell her if you want to. You said she's your best friend, right? Tell her, I don't want us to come between you and your best friend. So he's right away risking, like, I'm giving you the keys here, and, like, you know your friend, you trust her, I trust you, and I can't, even though the risk is there for Scott, he can't impose this forced secrecy on Kip in the way that it would distance him even from his best friend, which I think is awesome. He's like, I'd love to meet her, save her a dance at the gala. Kip sounded like a weight had been lifted, but Scott felt like it had been placed directly onto him. He chewed on his thumbs, and we get back to Valentine's Day. He talks a little bit about his upbringing, and Kip quietly says, I want to know everything about you. And Scott thought his heart might just burst. You can ask me anything. And even though this is a great sort of like ramp into talking about a bunch of personal things, Kip's pretty wiped. He's got work early, but he wants to make sure that before he hangs up, he says, I'm glad you called. And of course, Scott's like, well, first goal's for you tomorrow. Obviously thinking he's joking, Kip's like, fuck off. He's like, nope, the first one's for you. We get Zulo being Zulo and kicking out his young teammate who he's bunking with to hook up. And of course, Scott, he gets a cot sent up so the kid has somewhere to sleep. And we switch over to a dinner at a Mexican restaurant with Elena and Kip. She has looked over his resume and cover letter. She had given him some notes. And she's like, so what's this news for me? Boy is over the moon, obviously now finally able to tell Elena about Scott and about what they're doing and what he feels about him. I've been seeing someone, Scott as in Scott Hunter. We're dating, boyfriends. She counters that with secret boyfriends and admits, like, I've never seen you like this. I'm just happy he's really, in it and wants to tell her everything because he's been keeping it all inside. And so she says, screw it. This is definitely a beer lunch. Tell me everything. We then get the Admiral's kind of coming off the rails a little bit here. Everyone seems to be kind of in a mood, not playing great. Something's off. Kip is actually watching the game with his parents. They end up losing 6-2. Scott did end up scoring one of the goals, which I guess is for Kip. Dad makes a joke, must be the smoothie withdrawal, right? Must be. And Kip just notices like he's never seen Scott that mad before, which is just strange. Just submitted to like he knew he wasn't going to hear from him tonight. Fell asleep, woke up the next morning to a text from Scott that came in at 1:30 in the morning. I'd give anything to see you right now, which I think is a great balance for kind of how Kip went to bed, assuming that he wasn't even going to hear from him because he was so upset or whatever. And that just did it. Kip is officially lost in the sauce again, snaps a quick selfie, and that is returned with a wow text from Scott. I can't believe I didn't have a picture of you before. Thank you. And Kip responds with, oh, I don't have a picture of you. In a joke, he sends a screenshot of like a Gatorade ad he had done. And riding the high at work, Maria's like, what is up with you, dude? Technically, most of it's Scott, but he has officially applied for that job at the museum, which is great. She's happy for him. And we fast forward to the game that night. They are playing Boston. Obviously, Rozon is there. And based on how embarrassing their loss was the night before, everyone's a little bit on edge and ready to put all of their energy into the game. Our boy is watching the game with Elena. Scott punches Rozon in the face. Again, this like aggression that Kip has not seen out of him before is kind of on display on the screen, and he gets penalty time, obviously. Elena's like, you should text him. He's not doing anything for a few minutes, right? He's sitting in the box. Obviously, he doesn't have his phone on him. And jokes, well, you should send him the picture of you in your tux. And poor Kip. It's like, you want it to be a surprise, maybe. He's a mess. Elena offers for him to stay in town if he wants, cut the commute. He has to go back to grab a bag and some clothes because he is going to be spending Valentine's Day with Scott. And just as like he's riding that little high, she asks, oh, are you going out? Obviously not. Again, we're reminded of the closet element here. And rightfully so, she asks, is this really worth it? And at least at this point in time, Kip thinks that it is. We don't get much of any of that in the show, I don't believe. Maybe the outburst with Rozon, but I don't remember him actually punching him in the show. So I think this one in its entirety didn't really make it necessarily into the show. And I don't, again, back to the previous point, I don't remember, because we didn't get Kip with like permission from Scott to like fully tell Elena in the show. I think that Mexican restaurant conversation may have been morphed a bit to fit the storyline that Jacob and team were working with. Chapter 9 is Valentine's Day, or at least the first half of it. Scott texted Kip, getting on the plane soon, see you tonight, can't wait. But unlike the first time that Scott wanted to have Kip over, he is setting a later time for them to get together. It's not come over whenever. He's like, I need some time to cook, which Kip would have preferred to just go over, it seems like, but whatever. He finished work at 2, had some time to kill, went to the gym, changed into his outfit for the night, which was a deep red shawl neck sweater that he got on sale at Old Navy. Again, acting as that counterpoint to the Hugo Boss of it all in Scott's life, and obviously joked that it would come off easy. We get Kip acknowledging that he had never done Valentine's Day before. I guess, given what we learned earlier, that he had never had a real relationship, that, makes more sense. But again, it feels like he's more of a lover boy, at least in the show, that someone would have, wined and dined him before. Continuing to play on the finances of it all, he's looking at, a $30 of wine, a $40 bottle, maybe some beer. He really didn't have much money at all in his bank account, but wanted to do something. And we cut back to Scott, who is just like nervous and excited. These feelings were all new to him. He hadn't had anyone to care for or to care for him since his mother. This all-encompassing desire to be with Kip was like nothing he had ever experienced before. We then get a little bit of backstory around these like exotic summer vacations. He tended to go to pubs, not clubs. He was a horrible dancer. He always had someone come up and approach him, and that he treated these encounters as provisional, educational, and maintenance, which is interesting, I guess, especially the educational part. But I guess going back to what we learned about the different types of experiences he has, probably not a bad thing, but that obviously everything with Kip had been different. He was smitten. It was the only word he could think of for it. We also get him acknowledging in the quiet that he had never celebrated Valentine's Day before. That makes probably a little bit more sense to me. And he had a lot of plans of like wanting to take the night slow, pamper Kip, make him feel as special as he was to him. It's good to see you again. You have no idea. Obviously, they jump back onto one another, and he's like, I mean, we could wait, but I was thinking we might want to get the eating out of the way. And Scott still can't get enough of him. You look good, really good. And Kip kind of walks in just to see everything set up and is like, all this is for me. And of course, Scott's a little bit sensitive and nervous, and he's like, oh, is this too much? I'm sorry, I've never celebrated Valentine's Day either. Kip acknowledges he hasn't as well, and Scott finds it hard to believe, but is somewhat relieved that he doesn't have this like mystery person he doesn't know that he's trying to compete with to make it the best Valentine's Day yet. And of course, Kip is like, and I have a feeling you would have won anyway if there was another. And we get another quick, cute callback to the sport of it all of I like winning. No shit. I think it's important that Rachel put this in here, that it was easy and comfortable. There was not this, they've had a couple like good moments when they're very physical and intimate with one another, but then there's always a little bit of a rough patch or even just a slightly awkward moment or two. But I think getting everything out of the way that they've already talked about, it feels light and easy and comfortable, which is great. And as they sit down for dinner, Scott brings up that this is actually kind of also their 1 month anniversary of when they first met, and that he was just so glad he had decided to get a smoothie that day and run into Kip. And Kip pulls out the blueberry socks, which obviously sends Scott over the moon, loves them, gonna wear them all the time. The socks gift in the show was kind of placed so that it was right before Scott was about to go on the road for a number of games, and kind of the way for him to like remember him by. But again, we didn't get Valentine's Day in the show, and so you had to find a cute place to put it. Makes sense to me. They finish dinner. Scott then is like, oh, we've got dessert. I've went to a bakery. Kip had already held off long enough, and so we were going to have to get back to the tasty treats. Even though Scott had all these plans, he can't really say no, but he thought, you know what, maybe it just makes sense to get the edge taken care of and then go back to the slowness later that night, because clearly they have demonstrated their ability to go multiple rounds. Kip does what he does best, and very quickly that moment has passed. Turning his attention to Kip, we then get a callback from the last time that they were together. Scott had asked to watch him, clearly a theme that Rachel has at least written into both this and Heated Rivalry. Scott reiterates that yes, that is something he's very interested in, puts on a show, asking permission. He wants to move closer to the bed to watch, and Kip lets out an accidental, yeah, sweetheart. Scott blushed at his new pet name. With the edge taken off, Scott says, now seems like a perfect time for the next thing I had planned. Overall, a cute chapter. You're getting to see, again, that the dating of it all, the wanting to make it perfect for Kip and vice versa. Totally cute and benign. And we are going to move on to chapter 10, which will be the last chapter we'll be covering in this book. We'll pick up the next 10 chapters in the following video. But this is part 2 of Valentine's Day. The thing that Scott had planned was them taking a romantic bath together. Kip, being someone who very much did not want Scott to do anything financial for him, is totally okay with the physical pampering and the attention that Scott so desperately wants to give him tonight. Relaxing in the oversized tub, they're both just enjoying the moment. Kip tipped his head back so it rested on Scott's shoulder. Scott wrapped an arm diagonally across his chest and kissed the top of his head. "This is nice," Kip murmured. "It's perfect." Scott talks about how when he first, bought this place, he always had wanted or imagined sharing it with someone. And not just the tub, the entire apartment, his whole life. And kind of feeling like maybe he's gotten out over his skis. He tries to pull it back and apologize because it's only been such a short period of time. And Kip just kind of interrupts him and says, "I don't know how I got to be so lucky." Giving him the confirmation, "You're not being too much. This is awesome. Thank you." And we get Scott kind of doubling down here. "I would share anything with you, Kip. Give you anything." He's like, "I don't need anything, except maybe to stay in this bath for forever." And we get Scott inviting Kip again to another game that night. Unfortunately, he's working an event, so he can't go. And we get this real and I think necessary moment where Scott brings up, "I hope you don't think that you're beneath me." He's like, "I'm serious. I just want to say it this once so you know. Because it's possible that you think I'm just taking a vacation or whatever with you. I'm trying to escape my high-profile life by hooking up with nobody. You're not a nobody. I'm not using you to escape. I love my life. I love my job. But this, I feel like I found the missing piece." And kind of lying to himself or lying to Scott is saying, "You don't owe me anything, okay? I don't expect anything, but I like you a whole lot, so thank you." As we see as things go on, he actually can't honor that anymore. But Scott just says thank you, and it's like, "This is all new. I'm trying really hard to take this slow and not get too intense." And Scott brings back up the, "You called me sweetheart." He acknowledges that he likes it, and so that now is cemented as Kip's pet name for him. Kip, now a little bit curious about what had driven such rage in Scott at the game, he asks, "What did Rozon say to you that made you so upset?" And he said, "He told me he was disappointed because he'd heard I was, quote, good at hockey again." They then talk about what life would be like if he wasn't a hockey player. He's like, "Maybe it would be social work. I'd like to help people." Kip reassuring him is like, "You do help people. Look at all the things that you do." He talks a little bit about his mom. Obviously, Kip's like, "She sounds amazing." Scott thinks that she would be proud of him, but would want him to do more, and talks about maybe at some point starting a charity for queer kids in sports to help them feel more comfortable. And with that, bath time was over, and it was time for the next event of the evening, which involves some blueberry massage oil. And just rubbing him down, Scott says, "You're so beautiful, Kip. I've never wanted anyone like this before. I'm breaking all of my rules with you." And joking, Kip's like, "Well, I am irresistible." And Scott is not joking, and he's like, "You are." After some time being massaged, Kip's whole body was relaxed. It felt like jelly, and it was almost like nodding off. He was so comfortable. But Scott, I think, was really positively impacted by the last time that they were together, where he got to top for the second time and was very much looking to have a repeat opportunity. Everyone is enjoying themselves, which is great, and they kind of collapse on top of one another, and Kip says, "Before I forget, I want to thank you for a lovely evening, the best Valentine's Day ever." And they kind of fall asleep in each other's arms with a "good night, sweetheart," finishing it off. They wake up. Scott asks him what he's up to today. Nothing on the agenda. Scott wants to make him breakfast. Again, the domesticity of it all. He was all about it. And unfortunately, Scott's phone keeps ringing, and it turns out that something came up. Zulo was arrested, and he was being called in to work that out with the team. He obviously was not happy that his day off was interrupted. He was planning, obviously, to have this like super cute morning with Kip, but no such luck. And of course, Kip, being a little flirt, was trying to coax him back into bed. Again, he's like, if I kiss you again, I'll never leave. And as he's leaving, he looks back and says, why do you have to be so goddamn tempting? Smiling sadly, and Kip grinned and pulled the blanket over his head, concealing himself completely. He heard Scott laugh, and then the door opened and closed, and Scott was gone. Again, another scene that we didn't end up getting in the actual show, but them continuing to explore one another, and we really did get to see the pampering side of Scott, which I think was great. And again, I'm assuming he at some point is starting to register. These acts of like service are the things that register with Kip, not necessarily the big swings, big gestures, that sort of stuff. But yeah, we are a third of the way through. I love the character building. I'm glad that we're getting these chapters that seemingly don't fit in the storyline, but I can kind of insert them myself with the show and make this thing make a little bit more sense. The Tux being a perfect example of that. Really one of the things that made the biggest impact for me in this section of the book is Scott's willingness to give Kip permission to tell Elena. I think that support system and that his ability to say it out loud confidently, not going behind Scott's back, did a lot for me actually in the way that I view both of their character arcs. It makes Scott much more likable, much less self-centered maybe than he sort of came off in the show. And we get to see Kip fully express his happiness to his best friend, which we get much more of the lust and the giddiness, but not like the real authentic feeling sharing between him and Elena. So yeah, so far so good. If you guys have enjoyed this video and you want to see more, go ahead and subscribe, hit the thumbs up, leave a comment, share it with a friend. Appreciate you all, and I will see you soon for the next 10 chapters of Game Changer. Bye.